All right, welcome everyone. I would like to call the May meeting of the African American Equity Restoration Task Force to order. As per customary, when we are visiting the deck, we would ask Reverend Renee Kessler to give us a welcome, please.
Thank you, Chairwoman Baker. What an honor to have you here at the BEC, and I especially will acknowledge City Councilwoman Gwen McKenzie and the entire task force. Were there any other elected officials? And then, because I'm a good preacher, are there any more ministers of the gospel in the house? So we welcome all. Welcome to the BEC. You're always welcome here. I'm very delighted to have you here and to have the conversation about the work that you're doing in this place. When we think about the work that you're doing, I have to say this because I get prerogative since you are here. You gave a preacher a mic and an audience, and she just might preach. Welcome to the BEC. That's how it happens. That's the Black culture. But let me say that, particularly since it's Mother's Day, the day after Mother's Day, and happy Mother's Day to all of you who may have been celebrating that. It's been a very difficult time for me, but I remember when I very first started doing some work in the community. A community person who I value very much many years ago said to me, she said, Renee, I think I was sitting on the KCDC board at that time, and I voted for something, and she sent me the most glowing letter saying, today, your mama smiled from heaven. She said that to me. I've never forgotten that. On Mother's Day, I often think about those things that would make my mother proud. And I remember helping Vice Mayor Gwen McKenzie when her mother transitioned. She asked me if I would help her during that time, and I was happy to do so. And I believe that on that day, when you went before City Council to pass a resolution to talk about restoring what we did during urban renewal, your mama smiled. This is huge. And I'm just honored to be here at the BEC to share this history that we've been working on. BEC is only here because of urban renewal. In fact, we were created just as a reminder, because after urban renewal devastated the African American community, many of our elders came here and said, we need a place to preserve and conserve African American history, because if we don't, it's going to be as though it never existed. Today, BEC has over 50,000 artifacts, over 5,000 pieces of which speak to the ramifications of urban renewal. And so to the idea that we get to get here and sit around the table and talk about how do we make our community better, I'm honored to be a part of this. As a native Knoxvillian, born and raised in East Knoxville, still live, work, play, and go to church in the same community that I grew up in. I am just honored to be here and to see you all sitting at the table making decisions that will make our community better. Not only for those of us who are here now, not only for those of us who were here then, not only for the future generations to come, but indeed you're doing something right now bigger than self, and I think Knoxville will become a model city for what it looks like to make amends for some of the horrors of history. And I like the way James Baldwin says it. He says, if you're not afraid to look back, then nothing you're facing can frighten you. So we look back on urban renewal and what it did, so we can look forward on how we can be better. My hope is that BEC will be a partner in that we will help you reclaim this history and this culture, because that's our responsibility. I was reading about what I would say in my opening comments And I pulled a magazine. There used to be a black magazine in Knoxville. It's called Our Voice. And this particular one was in 1970 when it was written. My predecessor and my beloved Dr. Robert J. Booker, who transitioned on February the 22nd of this year, wrote an article in this, and he talked about, in fact, the headline says, Urban Renewal, the Ruin, all for Knoxville. And he talked about the heartbreak of urban renewal, particularly as one who grew up and lived in the bottom, and how devastating it was. And what he said about it, among many things, was that at this point in 1970, we were on the third project, which was the Morningside Project. And the community was raising their voice. They were lifting their voice, saying, you can't do what you did to Mountain View and the Willow, the Bottom Project. You've got to do better. And they were raising their voice in this particular issue. But what was interesting is he said, this is not where it will stop. If we don't stop this, the next one is going to be Yale, which is the University of Tennessee. Then he started talking about various other communities, because that's what injustice does. It begins to trickle to all communities as it becomes an economics issue. So thank you for the work that you're doing. I pray and hope that you will continue to pour investments into this community so that we can partner with you in this important work to restore what we have lost through urban renewal, to rebuild it and to reclaim it. And we are so proud of you here at the bank. Please let us know how we can help you in continuing to do this work. So you're welcome here. Community, this is your home. This is your place. And you're always welcome here. So thank you for being here.
We want to thank Reverend Renee Kessler and the Vet Cultural Exchange Center, who has always been gracious in allowing us to come in, hosting community conversations, and being that place of convening, as well as informing. We want to ask Ms. Deborah Porter if she would go over with us as we go into this meeting our rules of decorum.
Good afternoon, everyone. Our rules of decorum: those who wish to speak during public forums should sign up by completing the public comment form listed on the task force webpage ahead of time, or by signing up in person prior to the start of the meeting at 5 p.m. All speakers will be given 3 minutes. Please do not use profanity and remember to stay on topic. Those who fail to adhere to those rules may be ruled out of order and asked to step away from the podium. For those who are listening, please note that you may not disrupt a public meeting from the audience. Those who do may be asked to leave. We appreciate everyone's respect for these rules. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Porter. Now we'll go right into our roll call. Tiffany, if you do that for us.
We've got Mrs. Tanisha Fitzgerald-Baker.
Present.
Mr. Brandon Harding.
Present.
Dr. Bill Lyons.
Present.
Councilwoman Gwen McKenzie.
Present.
Mr. Dave Miller.
Present.
Anderson Olds. Ms. Deborah Porter.
Here.
Stanley Taylor. And Mr. George Underwood.
Here.
Perfect, thank you. Hopefully you've had the opportunity to read the minutes, and if there are no questions or modifications, I'd like to call for a motion to approve.
I will move. I'll second.
Perfect, so it's been moved and we have a second. All in favor?
Aye.
All right. Any opposed? Perfect, so we'll go right into our staff reports, and I'll turn this portion over to Tiffany if you could share.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, there we go. Hey, everyone hear me? Alrighty, so for my staff report, I'll be giving a kind of like brief overview of the grant cycle. So as a lot of people have heard, we've had our first ever grant opportunity, which closed on May 10th. So this past Friday, we had 40 applicants, you guys. I know me and Tiffany Davidson, a few of the staff members have been looking through to make sure that we have all the pieces ready for our investment committee. We will say it's a highly competitive process. We look forward to working with the investment committee to serve as the grant review committee. So they're ultimately the ones that will determine the awardees as well as the amounts for the grants, which will then be taken to city council for approval. And then David said, did you want to become the task force candidates?
Yes, I'm not a nice person. Can everyone hear me? Okay. So during April and May, we met with about 10 candidates for the task force. And on that committee was myself, Tiffany Toombs, King and Middlebrook, and then we either had Stanley Taylor or Miss Deb Porter that served, and we interviewed those candidates to see if they would be a good fit for the task force. Essentially what we will do is take that list of individuals and provide it to the executive team or executive committee, and they will decide upon what they would like to recommend to Mayor Buchanan before she makes her nominations to City Council in June.
Thank you. So, information regarding candidate interviews?
Oh, she just said,
Okay, all right. Anything else, Tiffany? Okay, perfect. All right, so we'll go into our committee reports, and we'll start with executive committee. Yes, Mr. Underwood, please.
Right, just, we did. The executive committee did meet. I joined it as formally with the community, I guess, committee that has combined right now with the executive committee. And the reason for my joining that particular meeting was because part of our framework, and as I look at it here, and everybody has it, I'm sure, we have different components that we will, within the scope of our objectives. And one is home ownership. And as I read from our framework, particularly the section that says make it easier to pass down wealth through home ownership, the strategy would be to make estate and inheritance planning more accessible and affordable. And the bullet point under that is provide resources and education to community on estate planning, etc. I preface that to say that when I met with the executive committee, one of the people I wanted this task force to meet is a lady. I don't know how much I'm supposed to introduce her.
not too much, she'll do the rest.
Okay. All right, but one thing is, as part of our education piece, particularly when it comes to estate planning, because one of the concerns of this task force and of this whole mission is the amount of property and personal wealth that particularly Black and brown people lost through urban removal. And so we wanted to have a mechanism to educate, particularly people in this footprint, so where urban renewal took place.
Hey, George, would you mind hugging like that?
Okay.
There you go.
All right. And so one of the main objectives of this task force and the concerns of this task force is the footprint of urban removal and renewal, and how people lost their property. And so we want, as part of what we're going to do, as part of trying to, looking forward, make it better, is to educate the community as far as how to, if you got the property, keep the property, transfer the property, and just concerns related to estate planning. And to do that, and what I want to talk to the executive committee about and ask the executive committee to do is to reach out to the Knoxville Bar Association, because particularly when we talk about estate planning, lawyers are very involved and can be very involved in that process. And so they tell me I can't say too much about our speaker, but I do want to say, I'll just say this and I'll be quiet, is the Knoxville Bar, we have a very simple bar. Of course, I'm an attorney who's practiced here over 25 years. We feel very fortunate to have the CEO of the Knoxville Bar Association we now have. The reason why we feel so fortunate is because she has been in the trenches as an attorney. She's also, I think she's the TBA president, and she's currently the KBA president. And so I'm not going to say a lot, I just want to say that we're very grateful for her being here today. She had some ideas when we talked about it, consistent with our framework of what we're about. And that would be my report. I'll stop. Tiffany looked at me like, shut up.
No, thank you for that report, and I'm glad you mentioned that and some of the efforts. I think that's a game changer in helping our community be knowledgeable about how to keep their property and use that as an investment in generational wealth building, as well as currently. And so we'll move to our next committee report before we have our guest speak, and that would be our investment committee. Brandon.
Oh, thank you. I want to personally thank Reverend Kessler again for opening the facility and all the work that Beck does for educating the community at large, outside the community, of the effects of urban renewal and the goal of the task force. With the investment committee, we had a very robust conversation on April 15th. We met and we primarily discussed the grant that we are offering to the community through the task force and the reconnecting communities with the grant program. So I just took some notes from the meeting and just sharing basically what we discussed. We discussed how the grant would affect our task force, target communities, the input of the community, which we did not take lightly, and we also had a robust conversation about the verbiage of the original grant and how it tied into the mission of the task force. We discussed the pros and cons of accepting the $42 million towards the funding goal of the task force. We also confirmed our seat as an advisory on the utilization of the grant dollars with KCDC and Mr. Bentley. And after all the conversation, we as the advisory committee had a vote. It was a split vote to accept the $42 million toward the funding goal of the task force, with the caveat that future collaborations for funding accepted would need to be accompanied with a MOU, a memorandum of understanding, with the task force to ensure that the funds are being utilized in a manner consistent with the goals of the task force. That's basically everything we discussed. If anybody else was at the want to interject, but those are the notes I have.
That's well said.
Thank you, Brandon. And so now we'll go into the portion where we have some guest speakers joining us today, and we'll start with Tasha Blakeney, CEO of the Knoxville Bar Association. Thank you.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Let's make sure this is on. Now, okay, good. I'm not as tall as Reverend Kessler. I have to pull it down a little bit for me. My name is Tasha Blakeney, and I am the Executive Director of the Knoxville Bar Association. Thank you to my friend George for those kind words. I'm really grateful for that and grateful for your friendship and longtime support of the Knoxville Bar Association. Like George, I have been in the trenches, so to speak, as he said, and practiced law in Knoxville for 25 years before making the leap to go into the position that I have now, which is Executive Director. And as things happen, when things just kind of come together sometimes, George reached out to me and said, I'd like to come over and talk to you. I have some ideas about some ways that a task force that I'm working with, that we might be good community partners with one another. And so I didn't exactly know what he was coming to talk to me about. He just said, I just want to get on your calendar. And I said, you can come over anytime, George, and I'm happy to meet with you. Let's talk about what you're doing. So he told me about it, and it just so happened that the very next week, I was set to come here to Beck and have after hours behind the scenes tours with the Executive Women's Association that some of you I see around the table are involved in as well. And Reverend Kessler gave me a tour, and now I find myself back here again. So all signs point to I'm supposed to be here, as just like all of you, doing some work to help with the mission of this task force. So George did ask me to give some thought to ways that we might work together and be good community partners, and I've done that over the last couple of weeks. In fact, I've thought a lot about what Reverend Kessler showed me, and I'm really grateful. Thank you for taking the time to meet with us and educate us. Thank you. I've thought a lot about it, as I know that you do as well, and I do think that there are some natural fits for our partnership. I want to tell you just a little bit, very briefly, because like Reverend Kessler, I'm now the director of a nonprofit as well, so I'm going to talk a minute. But I also know you have a long agenda, and an invited guest should never overstay her invitation. So, but just to tell you a little bit, so the Knoxville Bar Association is a nonprofit membership association. We are a voluntary association of lawyers, law students, and judges. We do not compel anyone, we can't compel anyone to join our association. It is purely voluntary. But thankfully, we find that most people associated with the local legal community do elect to join. And I think it's because we provide a valuable service to our members and a service to the community. We are now about 2,000 members strong, which is a great thing when you think about a group of lawyers and law students and judges who are working together towards some common goals. So we provide innovative educational opportunities right here in Knoxville so that our lawyers don't have to go out of state or even out of Knoxville to get their required continuing education courses. But we also provide partnership opportunities and frankly opportunities for lawyers to engage with the community. We try to create those partnerships so that lawyers have an open door to walk in and do the things that are meaningful to them. So like George was saying, if you're a lawyer who is interested in estate planning work, then we're going to try to build opportunities for lawyers who want to do pro bono work along those lines. And we do a lot of those things. We do them already. A few things that we do, for instance, just recently on May 4th, we had a debt relief clinic. And I was looking at some of the marching orders, if you will, for your task force. One of the things that I think is a perfect fit for making sure that people, your constituencies and ours, to the extent they overlap, is making sure that people know that these things exist. Judge Balknight, who is a federal bankruptcy judge, realized over time and time again, we all hear Tennesseans are filing bankruptcy at very high rates, right? I mean, we all know this. Sometimes, though, that may not be necessary, and talk about a way to lose generational wealth, right? So her idea was to partner with the Knoxville Bar Association, with Legal Aid of East Tennessee, and other community partners, and create a debt relief clinic, because sometimes the reaction is, oh gosh, I don't have choices, I should declare bankruptcy, but maybe you don't have to do that. So this is a cost-free opportunity for people to get counseling from a lawyer and determine, do I really need to take that extraordinary step and declare bankruptcy? That was just May 4th, and there will be another clinic that's in the works now. We also do, how many veterans in the room, or people who have veterans who served right in your immediate family, members of the military? Me too. So my dad was a Marine Corps veteran. This is near and dear to my heart, and during my days of practice, I was a VA accredited lawyer. We hold every month a walk-in clinic for veterans legal clinic. So if you are a veteran and you have any issue, you do not have to make an appointment. You walk right in the door. You can come in and get access to legal advice, to resources and information to assist. We do that every month, and that is at the Public Defender's Office, and it's in conjunction with Legal Aid of East Tennessee. And then one of the most exciting things that I wanted to tell you all about, and again, this is just one of those situations where things just come together. I was looking at, you have one entire page in your mission statement that talks about investment areas for small business development and entrepreneurship, increasing profitability for Black-owned businesses, increasing Black-owned businesses with employees, and increasing access to resources and education to resources for Black entrepreneurs. Well, I'm happy to tell you that the KBA's Access to Justice Committee is meeting tomorrow to finalize the details for a minority-owned business clinic. And I'm very excited about that. That is going to be held at the Knox Area Urban League. We will have more details to come. That will probably be in June, but I will know more after tomorrow. I'm sorry that the meeting is not until tomorrow and I can't make an official announcement, but I do have enough detail to know that that is coming, and we're very, very proud to do that, and we would love to work with this task force to make sure that people who need to know that message, that this is available, get that message. So again, with all of that, thank you very much for including me and inviting me. I feel very, very grateful to be here. Thank you for all of your work to our community. I'm happy to answer any questions or to accept emails, phone calls anytime. Thank you.
Thank you. Now I ask for our representatives, Ben, Rebecca, Marissa from KCDC and the City of Knoxville to come and share. Oh, I'm sorry. Let me pause. I was excited. So before we move on, did anyone have any questions for Ms. Blakely? Okay. Well, I will say I did make a note of a list of the things that you mentioned so that we can talk about how to best get that information out to our community and specifically to those that would align with each goal or objective of these clinics. So I'm pretty sure Mr. Underwood will be our liaison in that way, but that is something we put on the agenda. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. If there are no questions now, we'll move to KCDC and our City of Knoxville staff.
Whoa, good start, right? How's everybody doing? Good. I'm Ben Bentley. I'm the Executive Director at KCDC. First and foremost, thanks to the African American Equity Restoration Task Force for the invite. We were with you a little while back, and to receive a second invite is kind of surprising after our performance, but thanks for, maybe you're giving us a chance to redeem ourselves, who knows. Also, obviously, thanks to Reverend Kessler and the BEC for having us. There's no, as you all know much better than I do, there's no better place to have this conversation. So we're going to start with an overview. We're just trying to provide information and opportunity to ask questions, and we'll answer anything that we can. Please be patient with us. There are some things on these grants that you just can't know yet, and so when we don't know something, we're not going to make something up. We're going to try to get you an answer, but it may take a little time. So starting off here, and I'm going to just paint a little background. Reconnecting Communities was really a new program under some of the Biden stimulus package in 2022, and it really sought to look at infrastructure that historically had divided communities, and how do we, through either one or a series of interventions, reconnect those communities. So it was, from the federal level, it was not going to solve all the problems that ail a community. You know, it takes centuries to create those problems, and it's going to take a long time and a lot of hard work to get out of it, but it was something that the administration thought could move the needle in some of these areas. So they put out a significant amount of funding. We read in what is in the federal world called a notice of funding opportunity. It's usually a 50 to 100 page boring document, but the good news is it tells you hopefully how to do something good in your community once you've gotten through it. So this particular opportunity was it was pretty significant. It said find infrastructure within your community that was built. It didn't say urban renewal, but I mean all the language was suggesting most of it would have happened during urban renewal, that bifurcated communities, and then propose projects that are shovel ready to be able to really reconnect and reknit that community together. James White Parkway immediately came to mind, and some of the other roads that kind of, you know, travel off of that. So I think Summit Hill Drive, and there's some other examples as well. You know, it doesn't take very long down James White to notice just what a severe cut that was through the community. Obviously, I didn't live here at the time. I know there are people in the room who did and suffered through those things. So what we have here really is, and we're going to talk about some of the specifics of it, but 7 interventions that are hopefully all along James White, from where it enters from 40 all the way back to South Knoxville, that are proposed to improve connectivity, access to jobs, recreation, education, and none of them alone are going to do it. The 7 interventions are not going to make that interstate perfect. I think I mentioned in my first time with y'all it'd be about $1 billion to try to take it down. That's not a financially viable project to return it to its former state, but I think these 7 proposals and then more stuff in the future is going to continue to make that better. I'll see if we're actually plugged up here to, oh, hey, look at that, when it works, I love it. So a firm foundation is obviously really important for anything that you do, and community partners are what make things possible. So earlier we mentioned an advisory group that was really built into the grant. One of those, and all of these are should the organizations choose to participate, so we would never place that on anybody, but there was a letter of support from each of these organizations that have incredible strengths, offer huge benefits for the project and just their perspective on both the area and the work that we're doing. So you can see here some of them. The Beck Center, obviously the task force is one, and there are a number of others listed there. We think that expansive input from community partners and from the community is critical. We're actually going to talk in just a minute about some of the processes that led to these individual 7 components, because my first question, if I just read this and didn't know anything about it, I'd say, where on earth did you get these 7 different proposals from? The truth is that most of those proposals had long public input processes before that the community had said, we want to see these things. In some cases, they had actually been partially funded through different processes, but there was still a significant gap. So this is one way that was an opportunity to fill that gap. The other thing that I want to say is that there was no other use of these funds. So these are federal funds that are passed down. So it was one of those examples where you can apply for it in Knoxville, hopefully do some good in your community, but there's not fungibility. We couldn't have said we actually want to take the 42.6 and use it toward, some other source. They are DOT funds, so they're very prescriptive in what they can be used for. All right, so at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Liz.
There's so many things to hold.
Yeah.
Okay.
I didn't even use the laser pointer.
Okay,
I'll click.
thanks. I'm Liz Albertson. I'm a planner. Previously to my position now with the City of Knoxville in urban design and development, I was with the Knox County Metropolitan Planning Commission for almost 15 years and have recently joined RJ's team and working on some of these projects. So just wanted to reiterate, how grateful we are that folks have been interested in providing letters of support for these grant applications. And this one that we were awarded, it actually was our 2nd grant application. So I believe back in 2022, Marissa with KCDC, I believe, was here to ask for support for that grant application. That was the pilot program that happened for this Reconnecting Communities grant. And we were actually not awarded that application, unfortunately, but we received really good feedback from USDOT that encouraged us to reapply. So we came back again to the list of community groups that you saw asking for letters of support for this grant application. And then we found out just this past March that we were actually awarded that grant, and it was the largest in the state of Tennessee. There were 2 other cities, I believe it was Chattanooga and Memphis, that were also awarded Reconnecting Community grants. Okay. And this is a list of just some of the more recent public processes that have highlighted the need for multimodal connectivity through the James White Parkway area. So beginning back with the MLK Junior Avenue Corridor Plan in 2006, 2007, obviously that was leaning highly on the idea of complete streets for MLK, so looking at biking and walking as other options in that corridor. And then in 2016, the City of Knoxville's Greenway Corridor feasibility and assessment study was really
big, substantial project that had several community meetings and surveys also involved with it that looked at connectivity across this area. So the maps that you'll see with the Greenway Corridor feasibility and assessment study, that actually aligns with many of the pathways you see in the Reconnecting Communities grant. There was also the 2019 Austin Homes Master Planning process, which had a lot of highlights related to infrastructure improvements for the Austin Homes area and how connectivity would work over to the new stadium, as well as to Morningside Park and area resources. So we also had the CAT Reimagine program that you may remember. There were quite a few public planning engagement processes that went on with that, including survey work, just to talk about where we can have increased multimodal access and how we can connect to these proposed greenway spaces. So there are quite a few others that we also have highlighted these needs for connectivity. So those in turn were really what helped make us really competitive for this grant process, because we had done a lot of previous planning activity related to this connectivity. So I'm actually going to turn it over to RJ now to sort of go over what our next steps are.
Thanks, Liz and Ben. I'm RJ Justice, and like Liz said, our office is the Office of Urban Design and Development with the City of Knoxville, and partnering with KCDC will be the familiar faces that we will work together as the advisory group. Tiffany will also join us, and Marissa from KCDC, to help continue the involvement of this grant and to see it to the implementation stage. But what happens now is a little bit of hurry up and wait. So we were all very excited to be awarded this grant. There is a phase where we wait to receive our final contract, and from the award date, that is about 6 to 12 months. So during that time, we cannot start on any of the projects. So we are just waiting patiently and communicating with our advisory group members and sharing the good news that we were awarded this grant, and we'll be able to implement a lot of these projects that are included in the grant. And these 7 phases that both Ben and Liz mentioned are highlighted at the bottom. Those 7 phases or scopes of the projects are the areas where you'll see different multimodal projects take place through this grant. They're all a little bit different with their scope, and they're outlined in the grants, and after we receive the contract, we'll be able to do further planning and phasing on how we will implement all of those 7 phases of the project. We will also, after the grant is finalized, have an initial advisory group meeting where we'll invite people from that list before that not only committed a letter of support, but also raised their hand and said, we'd like to be a part of this team to help guide this grant to completion. So we're looking forward to all those partnerships and continuing this work. And hopefully we'll be able to say we have a contract sometime before 25, but at least early 2025. And if you all want to do questions now, or let me know how you want to proceed, but that's all we have to share for now.
Got a question. So, is the grant and particularly the implementations prescriptive around how each of those community groups can appoint somebody to the advisory group, or so the task force is one? Is there flexibility in who we decide to nominate to serve on our behalf, to the extent we want it to involve members of the community, say, versus people on the task force?
It says each group that says there's a specific member to be representative of, let's say, the task force. I believe that's really up to the task force.
I suspected it was not prescriptive.
Yeah, it's not prescriptive. I will say we have chosen Tiffany as a COK employee to also be a part of our team. So So we wouldn't count that participation as your task force participation.
Okay. And if I may, while I'm on roll, since I have mine, unrelated question though, but to what extent, and this may be unknowable, but I'm kind of interested in any perspective you had on the grant process, to what extent do you think the task force's support letter, given how closely aligned our mission is with the grant, to what extent do you all believe the task force's support had a material impact in us winning the award? Thank you.
I think it was mentioned on the front end, and rightly so. I think Councilwoman McKenzie's $100 million commitment, and then the history that went beyond that, the task force support was huge. And the Beck Center, having institutions in this community that have been working in this space with people for a very long time, that's meaningful. And even, I worked at the federal government, so I can say this, even a Fed person sitting in DC can read those things and they can tell whether it's actually a group that works with the community and is of the community, or if it's some folks that have been created to sit on a committee. We had meaningful participation, and that made a big difference.
Thank you.
I had a question as well. So when we talk about the 7 phases, I was curious if the 7 phases that you have listed are all from the Reconnected Communities grant or part of the larger, I think I read it was maybe like $85 million project. And so is this for the broader project or more narrow?
All right, I've been told to go ahead, so I will follow orders. So yeah, this is the 85 million. What most of these federal grants require is a match of some variety. In this particular grant, it required a 50% match. So it's a little bit of a science and a little bit of an art. We found some projects that had been partially funded, and we're able to count the commitments toward that. We also were able to include a few projects that had been entirely funded. So I think the East Knoxville Greenway was a good example of that, and leverage that commitment in order to bring in additional funds. So the 7 components are the 85 million, but 42.6 of that will be from the grant. Does that make sense?
It does, thank you.
Question. You know, the 85, like you said, it's 85 altogether. Is there a list of those other grants that you're working on that you were able to parlay to make the whole 85? Is there a list of those grants and what they were going to do? And also, the full proposal is online at the KCDC?
Yes.
Okay. And you're saying it's 6 to 12 months. Actually, right now, you don't have the money. And you don't have a contract.
Correct.
Okay. So, because I still feel like that with all of those names, that's good and all the rest. But we had a meeting, I guess, about 2 or 3 weeks ago, a community meeting. And by that I mean citizens who either went through urban renewal or whatever it may be, and they expressed themselves. And at that particular meeting, the decision was, by the people who were there, but they were asked to come out, was that because of the fact that the task force had certain things they wanted to accomplish with money, that this money particularly did not accomplish those things. It did not work for housing, it did not work for workforce and things like that. So based on that, the citizens said that money should not be added to the 100 million in order to make enough to make 100 million. So anyway, we're probably going to talk about that later because I do have some time to talk. It gets on a 3-minute talk. But this, the narrative, I have to say this, the narrative on this discussion is disjointed. Urban renewal, 1,200 communities, not only Knoxville, 1,200 communities were destroyed economically with urban renewal. It had nothing to do with riding downtown, walking downtown, any of that. It had nothing to do with that at all. It was a deliberate attempt to destroy the economic base in the African American community. So until we discuss it in that language, we're never going to solve the problem. And it's always going to be urban renewal going on. Or they can call it gentrification, you can call it whatever you want to call it. But until we address the issue that bicycling is good, I have a bicycle. Walking is good, I walk all the time. So all of that's good, but that has nothing to do with the fact that no money is transferred in the African American community for the most part from Lonsdale to Burlington. That's the issue. So if some of this money can be transferred into that area, that'd be good. But other than that, it's what it's always has been. We had money coming in for, you know, all kinds of things. These names is underserved and all those different kind of things, the buzzwords are always used, but the money never comes, never helps out.
Thank you, Ben. Are there any other questions from the task force? All right.
I wanted to confirm that, because I didn't exactly hear that answer as far as Tanisha's seat on the advisory. That does not represent our seat as a task force, right? That's what was said?
Yeah, Tiffany is helping us out, but that does not represent y'all's seat on the task force.
Okay.
No, thanks for clearing that up. I had a little note to say. Okay, all right. Are there any other questions? Okay, sure.
We had a task force member who had the concern and raised the question. And he put it like this. He said there are like 3 phases to big announcement. You have the announcement phase, then you have the advisory phase, and then he said you have the decision-making phase. And so my question to you is, it's clear that we are going to be on the advisory phase, but are we going to be able to impact the decision-making phase?
Please jump in here, I'll say a few words, and then I'll be wrong and you can fix it. This one is a little strange because the 7 components are at different stages in the planning. I mean, the East Knoxville Greenway, there's a firm route and it's funded, so that one there's not as much ability to shape it because I think it's pretty determined. There are a couple of other phases, the, sort of, well, I don't know what we want to call it, the creation of a space between the old city and the baseball stadium, which frankly, from a First Creek at Austin perspective, when we were doing that master planning process, one of the things we heard from residents directly was the cut. You got to keep the cut, and what they meant was the walking path right there along First Creek. So I think the walking path along First Creek, the open space at Austin, and then some of the sections under James White, there's still some flexibility to give input and make decisions on, but the East Knoxville Greenway, potentially Urban Wilderness Gateway Park, some of those projects are pretty far along in the design, so I think it varies from component to component, but yes, there will be an opportunity to shape the end result.
So in alignment with that question, as I look at probably one of the components that piqued our interest and garnered our support, the cultural corridor and connectors, we're looking at Summit Hill, Morningside, and Dandridge. And then how all of these 7 phases together can work together to be of benefit, particularly to the African American community, but the city at large. I think a lot of us are of the mindset that in order to win, you don't have to have a loser per se. So we are looking for a mass win that can attract economic development, but the way that it's set up, it looks like it will intentionally provide opportunities within the area that was devastated, as that word has been used and is accurate by urban renewal. Would that be correct in your opinion?
That is, yes.
Okay. If you go back to, I think it was the very first slide. All right, so at the second bullet, where we are looking to engage economically disadvantaged communities to increase affordable, accessible, and multimodal access. I had an opportunity to try to look at other cities who had these type of plans, this type of funding, and did notice some of these things, they might seem peripheral, but I'd like to know to the extent which these things are possible through our grant, like we see the increased access to jobs. Not only that, the projects themselves will create jobs, so that was easy. But grocery stores, some of the businesses that we already have and some of the locations like the deck, our park space and how we make that more attractive and accessible, this piece will be heavily influenced by the grant. Yes?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Thank you for that. Are there any other questions? Yes.
And I don't mind, whoever answers is fine. Because these are federal funds, is KCDC under the Justice 40%, because these are federal funds, and 40% will be given to, I won't say given, but jobs will be done in that manner?
So I'm going to answer without having seen the grant agreement. My impression is yes, and when we get that DOT grant agreement, all of that federal language will be in it, but I think yes.
So you spoke about the, again, thanks for coming in to clear up some questions. You spoke about the 6-month pause as far as the funding, some of the other grants and projects that were already underway that counted toward the 50% match, including the $42 million. What outstanding funding, just in general, is out there to complete the proposals that I'm reading about?
So the other projects that were the match to leverage the new funding, all of those projects are funded in multiple different ways. Some of it is grant funded that has already been accepted. Some of it is city capital dollars. And I think those are, and we do have some state funding also. There's a multimodal grant on 2 of the greenways. So it's a combination of funding that is already in place that leverage the $42 million. So the great thing about this grant is we were able to use dollars that were already obligated to leverage these new dollars, so we don't have to come up with more pocket change to put towards this now that we've received $42 million.
Can I give an example too, real quick?
Well, just so I clarify, those funds have been secured, not necessarily distributed. The other 50%, for me to understand correctly.
Correct. That's right. And I was just going to say another good example, because I'm tying back to First Creek at Austin. Through that process, programmed open space. Harriet Tubman's great, Morningside's great, but there's a lot of children that live in that neighborhood and more are going to live there, and they need a place to play. And frankly, we, outside of City of Knoxville funding, and they've provided a lot for the infrastructure in that area, there was not a direct source for parks. So what we were able to do is take the City of Knoxville's commitment toward some roads that haven't been built yet, and essentially leverage that future commitment toward roads at First Creek, and now be able to provide a world-class park for people that live in that community to the tune of about, I think it's $6 to $7 million, I can't remember the exact number. So I just wanted to provide a specific example for where the city had put in capital dollars, and we were able to leverage those for an outcome for the community.
Anyone else? All right. And so we'll move to the portion of our agenda for task force business and announcements. And of course, a part of our business will be a discussion and vote on Reconnected Communities Grant. But before we do that, are there any announcements from the task force? All right, well, I have one. I would like, so this graduation season, and just want to encourage the task force to help and celebrate the young people this season and their accomplishments. And we will be looking at, one of the things we're interested in is how to keep our talent here. And so as we kind of enter this season, I've been thinking about ways that the task force can help with these pipelines, these pathways to college, tech, trade, career, whatever that is. So just want to make a point of that discussion, but primarily announcing that it's graduation season, and for us to be intentional about looking for opportunities to celebrate our young people at this milestone. And so getting to the order of business with the Reconnecting Communities grant and appreciating all of the information, to backtrack a little bit, when the grant, the information was first provided, there was a lot of consideration, a lot of research and input and thinking about how this benefits not only East Knoxville, but how does this actually benefit communities? And then we could narrow it down to East Knoxville because that was the purpose of the grant. In April, there was an intent at that time for us to vote on whether the task force should actually accept that as a portion of our investment under the mission. So at this time, if you have it on your table or in your packet, I want to call your attention to a visual that kind of has an umbrella. And but in April, there were some challenges and concerns that were raised about accepting these funds. And so we paused the vote, one, so that we could have a better understanding of those concerns and allow opportunity for voices from the community to have input. Now, that being said, prior to the grant, as a part of the grant process, you listed a few there, but there was a history of community input. So through that list, and I look back at that, these are things in this grant that are written that people have asked for over time. When this grant opportunity came about, then there was another round of community input, including the task force, the BEC, and the others that you had listed. But still, taking into consideration those that might not have had the opportunity to speak at that time, we did pause the vote. After that, there was I believe it was called a meeting of concern. And so I attended, a couple of the task members attended, so just bringing some of you up to speed. And the question, and they'll have an opportunity to clear it up, but what I heard was that the grant was beneficial, but it should not count toward the mission of the task force because it did not fall into the 3 buckets that were priorities. So, gonna back up, if you look at the visual, to what the purpose of the task force is, to study, review, and identify strategic solutions that will improve areas of disparity and disenfranchisement in the Black community. That's the big umbrella. When we look at the devastation and the harm done by urban renewal, we knew it was impossible to fix. But first of all, you can't fix the past, you can just learn from it. So we looked at what are all the things, and all of these buckets started coming on the table. Those of the task force can remember there were a lot of areas. What we had to do in order to get momentum and movement is identify some priorities. We started thinking about, well, where are there some gaps? What would make some significant contributions, move the needle, help the current residents to actually see some benefit and investment. So if you look, there are a few ways that we can kind of spill the money out into these buckets. The money comes from, above the umbrella, grants and in-kind contributions, right? So we collect that. When we talk about grants, I spent some additional time really trying to understand the grant world. But I mentioned at that time the leverage, and Ben, you mentioned it here. It's like you have to have money in the till. When you have money in the till, you can go after more money. So if you have $500 in the till, you can go after 500. If you got $42 million in the till, you can go after 42 million. What we're looking for are grant opportunities for all of the buckets. And we're, based on research and what has happened, we believe that these buckets contribute to generational wealth. But we do have an investment committee who actually had the opportunity to spend some more time kind of deliberating and understanding and looking at all the pieces. And we have a recommendation from the investment committee to count it, and I am in agreement with that. But what I'd like to find out from the task force, if you have any additional questions before I ask for a motion about the grant, the benefit, us counting it, or anything like that.
I don't have a question. This is, and I raised this at the investment meeting, maybe even at the last meeting. It is something that, and I don't know if, I'd be interested if there's clarity. I was actually trying to find even the, and Gwen, you would probably know this, is the original document resolution that was passed, is it prescriptive that it is up to and we stop at 100 million, or does it use language in terms of at least 100 million? I'll just tell you, my question is based on the notion that I continue to believe, even as I've studied it, listened to feedback from the community, that this grant is very much in alignment with our mission. But when a strong group of community citizens raises concern, and there's a history of distrust of institutions that I don't necessarily think is warranted here, and I take that as of significance. And so my belief is, and where my head is that it ought to count, but I also appreciate that we shouldn't necessarily stop there. And so I'm interested in, if the notion is not we're going to get 42 and then we go find another 58 and then we're done and we all go home, which I don't believe it is. I believe the intent is to have it be an order, significantly larger than that. Then I personally get even more comfortable that this is in alignment with the objections, because we're not taking away from anything we might do. We're only increasing our likelihood of being successful. Any thoughts?
So you're absolutely correct. So the wording and the verbiage in the resolution does state that the goal of $100 million for this initial endeavor that we're on, because the landscaping at that particular time was not one that was going to be very agreeable, and it was for those who were involved. And I think we had over 2.5 hours worth of conversation at this particular meeting regarding this resolution. There is no amount of money that could ever atone for the damage that has been done. So let's just be clear about that. But when you're putting forth a resolution, you do have to have some numbers that are attached. So that is just a goal. No, the work doesn't stop. However, it will be incumbent upon future administrations that are sitting at the mayor's seat as well as on council to make sure that this work is continued and sanctioned by the city. So we have city staff here that are only here because this was approved by city council and supported by the mayor's administration. So I do want us to be clear about that part. So that does not mean that if the next administration does not support it, that we as a community could continue to fight for this money and have partners and collaborations. I do think that the work that's being done here, the partnerships, the collaborations, the grants that are being applied for and that are being awarded are setting the tone and making a statement, hopefully not just to the community but to future administrations, that this is necessary, this is needed, and this is what our community wants and deserves. But I do think that how we operate in this space will probably set the tone for what the future of this task force and the level of support. My intent is that this task force will continue on to infinity. But again, to have the city support, that is going to be incumbent upon the administrations that come after us, after my time. So, and after Mayor Buchanan is committed to continuing this work, but she can't speak for the next mayor that will come behind her. So, absolutely.
Thank you.
I appreciate that, Brandon. I believe I heard you mention that when we started taking on the work of the African American Equity Restoration Task Force, there weren't a lot of models to consider. It was historic in what Gwen did, and even putting together a committee of this sort to work on these things. And it is our hopes that we are creating a blueprint moving forward of how to capture community voices, for a city to be intentional about the investments for those that, and I'll use my own words, that were neglected prior to with investments and planning. So with that being said, if there are no other comments or questions, do you have none?
Chair, I want to also add to that, and then I'll pass it on to George. I also want us to be clear about what the landscape is, even at the state level, for the state of Tennessee. And in my opinion, it's very regressive with the administration that we now have leading our state. When a bill is being passed, that there will be no disbursement or studies on reparations. When we are a state that just recently in 2022 had the word slavery removed from the Constitution. So let's be clear about the work that's being done here, even that this task force was formed, is a victory. And that we have the city support, but I just want us to be clear that the dollars that we're bringing in are going to make a difference as far as us being able to get additional funding in the future. And also, I hope that we will set a tone that if the state tries to make other bills and laws that may even come down to this level, when you talk about restoration for urban renewal, because again, that was a federal program. And so yes, the state does have some interest in that as it relates to what was done federally that came through the state. And so I want us to never lose sight of not just local government, but at the state level, because that's where the laws are made and ridiculous laws are being made that we need to make sure that we're keeping our eyes on and being attuned to.
I'd like to pass this around to the task force, speak from. And in this packet, you asked about the resolution, it's going to be in this packet, where you can see exactly what the wording is. And I just wanted to put into the minutes, for me, what I did to prepare for this, and we each had to do our own preparation. But I reviewed the resolution R 367/2020, creating the task force. I reviewed the agenda staff reports from September 11, 2023, and ironically, that's when KCDC came and we were in this building. And we were first approached about supporting this. I think this was after the first denial, and then I think you all came here, we met with you here, we gave the letter of support, and you've already indicated that it was significant in it being awarded. I also put in the packet the framework for the task force, which is, kind of gives us our blueprint of what we're going to do and why. I also reviewed the reconnecting communities material. I reflected on the conversation that Ben Bentley mentioned over at the Knoxville Urban League when he came in, and you told us then that we will be intricately involved. And so when I go through this, and there's an index on the packet, and the first page 1 shows the announcement with Vice Mayor, I still call you Vice Mayor, Gwen McKenzie, and the Mayor. And then on that second page, part of the release, and it reads, the City of Knoxville and Knoxville Community Development Corporation, KCDC, have been awarded a $42.6 million grant from the U.S. Department of Transportation to implement a civic infrastructure plan intended to begin the restoration of cultural and economic opportunity to communities impacted by urban renewal initiatives. Again, the theme is consistent with the resolution. Then on page 3, you have the article that ran in the local newspaper and in that picture, a number of individuals, but significantly, and the ones I want to particularly point out, you have Councilwoman McKenzie, the mayor, chairwoman of the task force, and of course, Reverend Renee Kessler back, as well as Ben Bentley. These are the people who were instrumental in getting this grant. Then on page 6 is the resolution itself. You can see exactly the resolution that was passed. I think even to this day, it's still amazing. If you look on page 11, for it to say it was approved unanimously. and that was the work of Ms. McKenzie. I mean, that's, you know, for people who are in politics, they know the difficulty. I'm not in politics, but I used to work at the city and around politics. And to get the city council of Knoxville to unanimously agree to something is significant. And then we have more information, support materials about that. And then begin on page 20 is the framework itself. And there was one, yeah. And again, within the framework, we mentioned it earlier when Ms. Blakely did her presentation as well, that provide resources and education to community and state planning, which is consistent with our mission. So I just point all that out, Madam Chair, just to say that in review of all, I took this in consideration, and then I'm prepared for me to cast my vote, but I did want to go into the minutes what I took in consideration, as well as the presentations here today. Thank you.
And we did have a lot of robust conversation at the investment committee. I had pause about accepting the 42 million. And that's because originally, during the Act of Urban Renewal, our communities were directly targeted. And feels like originally, when accepting those funds, that we were discounted in the way they were being utilized under the grant. Urban Renewal ripped out a lot of generational wealth out of our community. And I think a lot of the community goal with looking at the headlines of the task force is that $100 million would go directly into restoring. So for me, I had to go do the same thing that you did, go into the numbers, understanding the grant and the funding for the task force. And I came to the realization that this is just the beginning of a huge snowball going downhill. And we're getting there. We don't have a model to go by. We're just getting started. So collaborating with KCPC and understanding that moving forward, this will be a collaborative effort with the entire city, with the state and federal government, to restore as much economic and generational wealth into the Black community as possible, understanding that it was ripped out during urban renewal. With all that said, I'm prepared to vote with the understanding that this is a beginning and the start to be able to be more poignant in the future with our funding goals.
Thank you. Well, I'll speak. Can you hear me? Thank you. I just want to echo, I think, what Brandon just said. This one seems to have died.
What Brandon just said, and George had said before, I've given this a lot of thought. We paid a lot of attention to the resolution when it was first passed, and also followed the way these sorts of funding opportunities tend to play out. And this is just the beginning. In no way have I ever thought that the $100 million was a cap. And being able to have this amount of money come in is like priming the pump, and for future efforts pointing to this and the task force's role in securing these funds, and as Mr. Bentley said, it was a significant role. I believe that it's a real positive to not only be part of this grant and count this toward what the task force does, it also gives a real important seat at the table for all sorts of decisions that are just absolutely essential, that the community have a seat at the table this time, where, as you said, there wasn't a seat at the table before. So I plan on supporting this as well.
Before we move on, I want to just to address something that George said when he was talking about how this resolution got passed, because it absolutely was historic from a lot of different levels. Number one, that it had support from, it was multicultural support. We had people from faith leaders, all denominations, emailing, blasting their church membership of over 400,000 people on the phones, calling people saying call and email your council members and the mayor and let them know that they need to support this and here's why it was so important. And maybe the one time, I think a lot of prayer had something to do with this, but it was one of the most poignant moments in time where it felt like everybody stood on one accord, regardless of personalities, regardless of personal differences, but we all stood on this was the right way, this was the start. Is it the end all? Absolutely not, but the fact that we're even here today, that we have a task force that is looking at addressing these things, and we have city support on it. It's not, for Knoxville, Tennessee, for the city of Knoxville, Tennessee, and I think sometimes we take it for granted. I know those of you all that are from bigger cities and cities of different types of demographics, when you move to Knoxville, Tennessee, you get a rude awakening sometimes. So for this to be accomplished in Knoxville, Tennessee, speaks volumes. And it speaks volumes about our community. And what I will say is, whether you disagree with this today, I want to thank you for supporting it when this came up before City Council. Because a lot of dissension would have, if we'd had dissension from our community or from a lot of other people, we wouldn't be sitting here today. This wouldn't be here. So what would we look like? There would be no attention given to this devastation of urban renewal. And again, it didn't just happen in Knoxville, Tennessee. It happened across, the United States and a lot of cities. But I just want to take this moment and say thank you to my community for your support, because this did not come lightly. It did not come lightly. And so wherever you stand on this task force today, that's okay. We can agree to disagree, but I sincerely thank everybody in this room and the entire community for at least pulling together and us showing that unity, that this was important, not just for our lifetime, but for the children and those to come. I'm gonna drop the mic on that.
Okay. I could use my outside voice, but I won't have to. All right, so while we are expressing our gratitude as we go into vote, one, I want to thank the task force for the diligence in which you all reviewed the task in front of us. And Mr. Underwood, this was a phenomenal collection of insights that really outline our work from the beginning to this point and really where we're trying to align. So I want to thank you for that. I'm also, like Gwen, thankful for the community and the passion. What I would like to throw out there and encourage is that we harness that passion across the board, right? Like that we are able to make sure, so beyond whatever the next administration does, if we can keep this same type of interest and passion across the board, then this work continues. It won't rely on the administration, it will rely on the people. And that is our hope as we try to kind of flesh this blueprint out and put all of the pins in place that will hold it together. So that being said, I am ready for a motion to ask if the task force feels it will be prepared or feels we should count the Reconnected Knoxville grant as a part of our investment.
I'll make the motion.
All right, so we have on record.
I'll second.
Oh, okay. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Great. All right. Are there any other announcements? Okay. So we will now move into public forum. We do have 4 people listed. We will ask them to come up and be mindful because let me say, we have these meetings every month. They are open to the public and public forum is also available every month. So there is an opportunity to reach out to us either on the City of Knoxville website or to show up at our monthly meetings. But based on the rules that follow similar to City Council, all speakers have 3 minutes. You are to give your name and your zip code ahead of sharing your thoughts. And so our first person listed for public forum today, first of all, who's speaking? Okay, Tiffany. Daisha Parker, and if I'm pronouncing that correctly.
Yes, over here. Should I go to the podium?
Yes, please.
Okay.
Did I pronounce your name correctly?
Yes, Daisha.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Okay, let me see. All right, can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so my name is Daisha Parker, and I am home from the 37918 zip code. First, before making my statements, I want to say it is counterproductive to issue a motion for something prior to hearing public forum. And as your colleague stated, it only deepens mistrust because it shows you never had any intention of listening to the public's feedback before you started anyway. So I want to say that first and foremost. So my name is Daisha Parker, and I'm the founder and curator of Silverline Productions. Silverline Productions is a digital storytelling archive studio that is dedicated to preserving the lives and stories of Black folks in the South. Our company is currently based in Knoxville, Tennessee, and we have been doing the compelling and necessary work of uplifting the history and stories of Black people who reside in the city. A large part of our work has been contending with the long-term impact of urban removal, aka urban renewal, in the city of Knoxville. In order to better understand my position, I'm going to provide some historical data around urban renewal So prior to urban renewal, Knoxville boasted over 100 Black businesses. After urban renewal, 15 Black businesses, 15 Black churches were impacted, and over 2,500 families, with over 70% of them being Black families, were displaced. Shout out to the Beck Center for providing the data to contextualize this conversation. So urban renewal represents an institutional heist to rob Black folks of their space, power, and wealth. This historical context has created a modern day phenomenon that has left nearly 50% of Black Knoxville living at or below the poverty line. This proposal, brought to us by the African American Equity Restoration Task Force, is an institutional cop-out that fails to account for the ways that Black people in Knoxville have actually been harmed by urban renewal. Black folks in Knoxville were not just regulated to an area, they were regulated to poverty, a poverty that has been passed down to generations. In the city of Knoxville, if the city of Knoxville and the African American Equity Restoration Task Force are truly invested in correcting the historical wrongs of urban renewal, my request is simple: divest from Band-Aid solutions that fail to address the actual harms caused. Invest in programs that encourage Black entrepreneurs and Black entrepreneurships, create equitable funding channels so that schools in East Knoxville have the funding to create vibrant, lifelong learners. Invest in home ownership programs that make home buying accessible for poor Black folks, because quite frankly, creating initiatives for trust planning when people don't own homes is counterintuitive. And invest in Black artisans and makers as they attempt to reimagine a new world and uplift a new culture. In closing, we are not asking for an apology for urban renewal. We are asking for systemic accountability for urban removal and actual solutions that address the systemic violence that was inflicted on Black folks and their generations that follow.
While I appreciate the grant opportunity and know that it may create nominal improvements, I lean deeply into the voices and experiences of those that have come before me and reject the proposal that this $42.6 million grant be put towards the $100 million resolution. I say this and I put this on record with the full knowledge that you all have already voted, but I think it is important that Black folks continue to resist and have that on record, because Black folks resisted urban renewal too, and they pressed forward because the call for progress was much too great. Thank you.
Deidre Harper.
I agree with everything that she just said. Very well said. Thank you, Deja, for that. And also, I know that we did, myself and Tanika Harper had hosted the East Knox community meeting for people to come and to show up to express their concerns, ask questions about the $42.6 million. However, it is disappointing to not see that opportunity presented again today. So I do challenge the task force that maybe moving forward, that is something that you all can implement in your meetings, that people can speak to the agenda items before votes are going to happen, so that you can hear. I know because Deja was not at the community meeting, so she did not have the opportunity that was not provided by the task force, but she didn't have an opportunity to speak to this particular item. So I challenge you all to think about how to incorporate that in your meetings moving forward. And I also want to say, I mean, she said like a Band-Aid solution, and to me, false hope is what kind of came to my mind, because it gives the notion that we have 50 million or 42.6 million towards some of the strategic framework that has been laid out regarding urban renewal. But when I hear even the conversations here, it's just like, well, we had to take this so that we can get more. And it's almost like I'd rather maybe conversation be more trustworthy and honest when we talk about this grant and what the purpose really is for. It is intended to help the Black community, the East Knoxville, well, part of East Knoxville community, but I know when people initially heard the $100 million resolution, we didn't think about greenways and parks. That wasn't what was said, that wasn't what was told to us, and that's not what I personally believe this task force to be established in order to do. So going back to distrust and a lack of intentionality when it comes to receiving funding, and I just hope that our organizations can really continue to just be, well, maybe not continue, start to be strong and start to really realize the impact that you all are making and will have on communities. When we think about the distrust, when we think about our people and already feeling like we're being sold out or lied to or giving false hope with things that would come to us, this sometimes seems to fall in line of those actions when we do have opportunities to kind of stand on business and really be intentional and thorough in what we're doing and making sure we're making decisions that will not only, that will provide hope and that will get more people passionate about coming to the meetings, passionate about really being involved, because it's hard to be involved when we have community conversations and we walk out of there with voices being raised and concerns being raised, and then we kind of come back to the table and make decisions different than what community has said. Now, the people that were at that meeting does not represent all of Knoxville, and I know there were some people that that did support this going towards the 100 million, but there's also a voice that, and I think a powerful voice, that can be heard and that can be trusted as community members when we're making decisions. I'm gonna look at my notes. Oh, and I did want to say that bill was not passed to ban local officials from studying reparations. It wasn't banned, it was just killed. So I did want to make that clarity.
Oh, Deidre, would you, because I didn't write it down, zip code?
3797.
Thanks. And then we have Lloyd Gable. And if you would state your name and zip code, I won't forget this time.
It is Lloyd Gable. It's 37915. Initially, I came just to listen. I talked to my classmate George Underwood about some things that I was interested in because I'm a product of this community. I used to live right down here. And I remember as a kid when urban renewal came in and my mom was just disjointed from it. So I have a different opinion from most of you all because I lived it. I walked these streets. I went to Mountain View. I was there. So a lot of people out here talking, I understand jobs, I understand other situations, but you weren't here. I was. So when I hear about improvements to this community, I'm all for it. Because when I saw urban renewal come in and I saw the community go down, and I'm still seeing parts of this community go down, now I'm seeing improvements in the community. So my thought is, what's wrong with improvement? I don't see a problem with improvement. And we talk about jobs, we talk about everything. How come we can't do both? We've got an avenue now. We haven't had this avenue before. We have it now. And you have to start somewhere. So I am for it. Unlike some others, I understand everyone has an opinion, but like I said, I was here. I saw it. I still have a house here. And we talk about transitioning, we talk about generational wealth. Well, guess who's living in my house now? My son. So I'm transferring that generational wealth to my son. Because had he not had the opportunity, he would have been struggling. He is now working, and I am tickled to death because he just accepted a position at the University of Tennessee. So now with property value going up, with him working, with him being here, guess what? It makes a better community, it makes him a better person. So I thank the task force for hearing me. That's my opinion, and I appreciate it.
Thank you. So there are a couple of things we need to address before we adjourn. One is to suspend or a motion. We did have the decorum and the rules, but we did have someone sign up following that time. So I believe we're going to either have to vote or make it, okay? But I'm also, as the chair, going to take a point of privilege to provide a little clarity about a couple of things before we adjourn. So one, I want to clear up the opportunity to hear from the community. So back in 2023, I believe, is when the discussion about this grant and our involvement started. And each month, there has been opportunity to provide input, and there are also avenues to reach out to the task force directly. The second point is, in April, we were actually had on the agenda to vote for this item and paused it because the community requested that their voice be heard. And so we honored that. So I would consider it just a little maybe misleading to think that we're making a decision after, before hearing the voices, because we did make an attempt to do that. And that's just in this room and in that meeting. But there were other opportunities and other people that we talked to get input for the grant. The other thing is, if you were to come to the other meetings, and we could get energy around other initiatives, you would learn about the initiatives in place. Very intentional, a lot of work into affordable housing and home ownership. Now, it wasn't on the agenda today, but it has been on the agenda for several meetings. So there are a lot of intentional efforts being made toward jobs, home ownership, and education. And so the grant money that we had offered to the community was open to address any of those initiatives you are passionate about. The third thing, just to be clear, in this seat and around this table are people who are here based on passion and purpose for the community. We do not get paid. This is not an elected position. So I can say that for the task force, but let me speak for me. Any work you see me do or I have done in this community has been without political ambition or pay. I am here because I love my community, East Knoxville, and I'm looking for a path forward for future generations to succeed. So I support this investment. In fact, if you give me $5 for my kids and my community, I'm going to take it. Now, if you disagree, I value that as well. And we have a right to that. That's what makes us stronger. That gave us time to research and consider, and in your point, we might not have done that had we not been challenged. But with that challenge, then we did our research and our homework to come to a decision that was made today. Now, in order, we do have one more person who wants to speak, but I will need a motion to suspend the rules in order to do that.
I'll make that motion.
I'll second it.
All right, so that motion has been made and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed other than me? Okay. All right. So we have one more speaker, Umoja Abdul, and I believe it's Ahad. If you come and give your zip code as well. And if I mispronounce the name, correct that for us.
I'm going to be brief. I'd like to make a suggestion that in the future, when you have meetings, you face everybody and not have your back to everybody. Because the way this is set up is, I've never been to a meeting where the people who are making presentations and representing you, you sit behind them. So in the future, could you maybe bring the table up here and do the chairs in a different kind of way so we can actually face each other and, you know, talk and communicate? That's just a suggestion. I'm glad to know that the check's not here yet. I'm glad to know that. Because also, usually, this part that y'all want to forbid, that is people speaking, I'd say 85% of the people who were at that meeting the other day said that this should not be added to the 100 million. For sure, they talked about, you know, they wrote that bike trails in all communities is a good thing. But what has happened, it looks like to me that when everybody made a presentation, I don't know how long that passed out, that the thing you passed out with all the other little buckets that we hear was decided upon. But when the presentation was made at the meeting, there were about 3 or 4 things that were talked about that the task force was really interested in doing. This is disgraceful. It really is. Regardless of what you say about being in the community and all the rest. There was a deliberate attempt to destroy the African American community. And if people don't understand that, and if they understand it and keep being a part of it, then they're treasonous. And if they don't understand it, then they need to understand it. Once again, I'll repeat myself. 1,200 communities, not over here, over there, this side of town, that side of town, in the African American community, in the United States of America, the government would help people in the community who didn't understand what they were doing, destroyed our community. So you don't ever think this is over. Don't ever think we're not going to continue to make community know about it and continue to try to shine the light on the people who are in the dark. Because you have to be in the dark. If you support something, you're not going to handle any of that $40-some million. Somebody else is going to handle it. And none of that money, for the most part, is going to go to make our community better. And the final end with this, instead of asking, will we be part of it? We have to demand. We don't have to ask anything. All these organizations would not be in existence if we did not genuflect and acquiesce. We acquiesce to KCDC all the time. All the time. Destroyed public housing, didn't do a house for a house. So people ask, how are these people get up under the bridge? Because in public housing, if you have 500 houses or 500 places for people to live, you didn't build 500 things back. You built 350, which means 150 people were planned to be sure that they would be under the bridge. It was planned. And I'm not just talking about KCDC locally, I'm talking about the HUD concept. So we have to actually know what's happening to us in order for us to relieve it, and this is not over. This is not over.
A motion to be adjourned. All in favor? All right, this meeting is now adjourned. Thank you.